go. Train tight. Where go?
Gentlemen, this school is about combat. There are no points for second place.
This is the Never Down, Never Out podcast with your host, T.R. Matson.
Welcome back, T.R. Matson, Never Down, Never Out. Thanks for tuning in. Feeling a little bit better, a little bit more energetic as I speak through these things. So hopefully I didn't wear anybody out yesterday talking about being on the struggle bus. But today, this topic, first of all, good morning. I hope everybody's having a great morning wherever you're at and tuning in. But today we're going to talk about staying focused under fire. And as I look at my sheet here on the screen, it blows my mind as we are within reach of the end of this segment. So for the people that don't know, real quickly, we started this back in January 2026, Foundations of Mental Toughness for the first 30 episodes, just the building block foundation there. And then we went into Discipline, Habits, Daily Execution. That was episode 31 through 90. And since episode 91, we have been on failure, setbacks, and resilience. I try not to overuse certain examples, but sometimes an example of something I've been through in my life works for multiple topics. So I try not to repeat myself too much, but that's the background of where we're coming from. Today, episode 132, we are talking about staying focused under fire. And let me tell you, focus is something in the Matson household that is at the forefront of our teachings. Mostly with my son. He's going to be, 8 this summer, and we have completed, if you ever complete, I guess, the first full school year of homeschooling. And by me, I mean, mostly my wife, let's be honest, she's the saint of the house. And it's been really rewarding to see him grow and flourish and become, this little man that is quite smart, and he's showing his talents and his interests and all that. But focus is something that is tough, and some of it is the environment you're in. There's times where he's doing homeschool work in the morning, and I have a 3-year-old toddler running around, and she's wacky and just messes everything up, and it's hard to focus. There's other times when I've noticed, yesterday we went on a walk. We took the puppy for a walk, my son and I, and, he's falling behind on the whole walk. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And he's just looking around at everything and not focused. Anybody who's had a young child play a sport knows the importance of focus. They're out there kicking the dirt or taking their gloves off or who knows what, eating boogers or something. But so the lesson of staying focused under fire is something that I don't think comes naturally. It's something that has to be taught, and you have to learn it. And it's a massively important lesson, because if you can't, as you become an adult, stay focused on something, then you don't stand a chance, because distractions are everywhere. And I find, this is where I'm going to sound like the old guy, but I find that as I get older, it seems like there's just more. When I was a kid, there wasn't a whole lot of distractions. We didn't watch a lot of TV. We didn't play a lot of video games. We went outside, we played, we had imaginations, and, you just weren't inundated by as much. Your world was pretty small. And nowadays, my wife and I spend more time trying to battle for him and my daughter to not be just bombarded with all these distractions, because with phones and tablets and TV and, we limit all of that to such a great degree. But it's the world, the world that my son and daughter will grow through is much bigger as a child than the world I grew up in and my wife grew up in. So we have to learn this focus. And I think there's 2 ways to do it. One is both of them revolve around the environment that you put yourself in. But one is putting yourself in a quiet environment. And you see me do that still to this day when, I talk about, hey, I'm going to knock out a bunch of recordings because it's quiet in the house and, I don't have to worry about the noise in the background or all that. I am building myself an environment where it's very easy to focus and I can be very efficient on my work and get it done. That being said, that's not life. So while that'll help me achieve short-term goals, i.e. recordings in this case, long-term goals, like that's not life. There's going to be distractions. There's going to be the phone call. There's going to be the roof leak. There's going to be the sick child. It just comes at you from all directions. So I think it's good to put yourself in environments where you are also tested in that. And you can slowly introduce those. So while I feel like a broken record often when my daughter's around being crazy and my son's trying to do work, I think it's good for him in the long run because he's learning how to continue to do math worksheets when there's a toddler jumping around behind him or things like that. I think that's going to serve him quite well because I can tell you one of the things in aviation that it's a story I'm not sure that I told, but it was in T-45s. And, I'd been an instructor in Meridian for quite some time. I was the wing LSO and pretty established there and felt good flying the aircraft. And I was doing a night formation lead. And you want to talk about staying focused, you have a script you have to fly as the lead aircraft. And you're going to take off, and the student who's going to take off very shortly after you with an instructor, if they're not on their solo, with an instructor in their backseat, is going to join up in the area, and you're going to go through a series of maneuvers that you briefed, and then you're going to come back to the field. Well, on this particular night, I took off, and right after I rotated, the aircraft, which for those who don't know, single engine T-45, started violently vibrating. I couldn't read the HUD, and it was just pure chaos. And I wasn't sure what was going on. I suspected an engine issue, which is not ideal in a single engine aircraft. And I immediately made a decision to switch back to tower to tell my wingman, who was about to take off, to get off the runway and get out of the way, and tell tower that I was going to go to a low-key position, which is a day VFR visual maneuver that allows you to set the power and get back on the ground very quickly. We didn't practice those at night. We had another instrument approach that we would practice at night. I was not sure that the aircraft would last long enough to do that instrument approach. So in the position I was in, I made the decision, this is what I'm going to do. I zoomed the aircraft up to 3,000 feet above the ground. I quickly set on our tactical frequency for my wingman to get off the runway and tell me when the runway was clear. And I told tower that I was going to low key for a full stop, declaring emergency, to which they naturally started to want to vector me for this instrument approach. And there was a lot of radio chatter from them, and I don't blame them one bit. That's what they're trained to do, right? They don't know who I am. They don't know the situation I'm dealing with. They are trained it was called a low oil GCA, and it's not necessarily just for low oil, but it was the name of this approach. And so they were trying to get me to do that, and finally I just stopped listening to them, stopped talking to them, and I flew the approach. And I actually got cleared to land from tower after I touched down. And it wasn't unsafe. My wingman had cleared the runway. There was no other aircraft in the pattern. We had done this by the book, but this was an emergency. And sometimes in emergencies, you have to get hyper focused because every little thing is trying to distract you. And ultimately rolled out on the runway. Maintenance told me to taxi the plane back at idle. And it was a bearing failure in the engine. And it probably would have been catastrophic if it ran much longer at a high throttle setting. So the lesson I learned from that is the ultimate focus. In naval aviation, I was blessed, gave me plenty of examples of honing my focus when needed. And I use those today in the airlines. And I think every pilot has that in their bag of tricks. So, but how do you get there? How did I get to where I could handle that situation that night? Well, some luck for sure. And, but also, it was putting myself when I was younger in situations, or whether I wanted to or not, some of it was just by the nature of how my flight training was, to where, I was sometimes in an environment that was very quiet, where I could focus and learn. And other times I was thrown into very chaotic environments where I just had to adapt and I had to fly the aircraft. And that's where you'll hear pilots talk about aviate, navigate, communicate in that order. And that's where we get it from, is the chaos. Fly the airplane first, figure out where you're flying the airplane and fly it there, and then talk to people about it. And that's something in life that I think everybody can use, is, break it down to that. There's so much noise. There's so many things out there. It's like, hey, figure out what you need to do, figure out where you're going, then talk about it. And that helps definitely with focus under fire. So whether you've heard that story before or not, if you have and you're bored with it, I apologize. But if not, I hope it makes sense. And I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll talk again tomorrow.
T.R. Matson is a 20-year Navy career combat veteran who flew the E-2C Hawkeye and F/A-18C Hornet. He's the author of Treason Flight and Vengeance Flight. You can reach him at T.R. Matson or trmatson.com. Thanks for listening to the Never Down, Never Out podcast.